Part 2 of Nonsense by H. Beam Piper. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Part 2. The big town was 250 miles down the valley, at the forks of the main river, a veritable metropolis of almost 3,000 people. That was where the treaty would have to be negotiated. But no two of them speak the same language. You'll want more huts, you'll want a water tank, and a pipeline to that stream below you, and a pump, Questel said. You think a month? Millard looked at Lillian Ransby. What do you think? Poodly doodly oodly foodle, she said. You saw how far we didn't get this afternoon. All we found out was that none of the standard procedures work at all. She made a tossing gesture over her shoulder. There goes the book. We'll have to do it off the cuff from here. Suppose we make another landing back in the mountains, say 200 or 300 miles south of you, Vendinho said. It's not right to keep the rest aboard 200 miles off planet, and you won't be wanting Liberty parties coming down where you are. The country over there looks uninhabited, Millard said. No villages, anyhow. That wouldn't hurt at all. Well, it'll suit me, Charlie Loughran, the xenonaturalist, said. I want a chance to study the life forms in a state of nature. Vendinho nodded. Louis, do you anticipate any trouble with this crowd here? He asked. How about it, Mark? What do they look like to you? Warlike? No, he stated the opinion he had formed. I had a close look at their weapons when they came in for their presents. Hunting arms. Most of the spears have cross guards, usually wooden, lashed on, to prevent a wounded animal from running up the spear shaft at the hunter. They made boar spears like that on Terra 1,000 years ago. Maybe they have to fight raiding parties from the hills once in a while, but not often enough for them to develop special fighting weapons or techniques. Their village is fortified, Millard mentioned. I question that, Goffredo differed. There won't be more than a total of 500 there, call that a fighting strength of 200, to defend a 2,500-meter perimeter with wood choppers, axes, and bows and spears. If you notice, there's no wall around the village itself. That palisade is just a fence. Why would they mound the village up? Questel, in the screen, wondered. You don't think the river gets that high, do you? Because if it does... Schallenmacher shook his head. There just isn't enough watershed, and there's too much valley. I'd be very much surprised if that stream there, he nodded at the 100-power screen, ever gets more than 6 inches over the bank. I don't know what those houses are built of. This is an alluvial country. Building stone would be almost unobtainable. I don't see anything like a brick kiln. I don't see any evidence of irrigation either, so there must be plenty of rainfall. If they use adobe or sun-dried brick, houses would start to crumble in a few years, and they would be pulled down and the rubble shoved aside to make room for a new house. The village has been rising on its own ruins, probably shifting back and forth from one end of that mound to the other. If that's it, they've been there a long time, Karl Dorver said. And how far have they advanced? Early bronze. I'll bet they still use a lot of stone implements. Pre-dynastic Egypt, or very early Tigris-Euphrates in Terran terms. I can't see any evidence that they have the wheel. They have draft animals. When we were coming down, I saw a few of them pulling pole travoises. I'd say they've been farming for a long time. They have quite a diversity of crops, and I suspect that they have some idea of crop rotation. I'm amazed at their musical instruments. They seem to have put more skill into making them than anything else. I'm going to take a jeep while they're all in the village and have a look around the fields now. Charlie Loughran went along for specimens, and for the ride, Lillian Ransby. Most of his guesses, he found, had been correct. He found a number of pole travoises, from which the animals had been unhitched in the first panic, when the landing craft had been coming down. Some of them had big baskets permanently attached. There were drag marks everywhere in the soft ground, but not a single wheel track. He found one plow, cunningly put together with wooden pegs and rawhide lashings. The point was stone, and it would only score a narrow groove, not a proper furrow. It was, however, fitted with a big bronze ring to which a draft animal could be hitched. Most of the cultivation seemed to have been done with spades and hoes. He found a couple of each, bronze, cast flat in an open-top mold. They hadn't learned to make composite molds. There was an even wider variety of crops than he had expected. 2 cereals, a number of different root plants, and a lot of different legumes, and things like tomatoes and pumpkins. "Bet these people had a pretty good life here before the Terrans came," Charlie observed. "Don't say that in front of Paul," Lillian warned. "He has enough to worry about now, without starting him on whether we'll do these people more harm than good." 2 more landing craft had come down from the Hubert Penrose. They found Dave Questel superintending the unloading of more prefab huts, and 2 were already up that had been brought down with the first landing. A name for the planet had also arrived. Svantovit, Karl Dorver told him. Principal god of the Baltic Slavs, about 3,000 years ago. Guy Vindinho dug it out of the Encyclopedia of Mythology. Svantovit was represented as holding a bow in one hand and a horn in the other. "Well, that fits. What will we call the natives? Svantovitians or Svantovese?" Well, Paul wanted to call them Svantovese, but Louis persuaded him to call them Svants. He said everybody'd call them that anyhow, so we might as well make it official from the start. "We can call the language Svantovese," Lillian decided. "After dinner, I am going to start playing back recordings and running off audio visuals. I will be so happy to know that I have a name for what I'm studying. Probably all I will know." After dinner, he and Carl and Paul went into a huddle on what sort of gifts to give the natives, and the advisability of trading with them, and for what. Nothing too far in advance of their present culture level. Wheels. They could be made in the fabricating shop aboard the ship. "You know, it's odd," Karl Dorver said. "These people here have never seen a wheel, and except in documentary or historical drama films, neither have a lot of Terrans." That was true. As a means of transportation, the wheel had been completely obsolete since the development of contragravity 6 centuries ago. Well, a lot of Terrans in the year 0 had never seen a suit of armor, or an harquebus, or even a tinderbox or a spinning wheel. Wheelbarrows. Now there was something they'd find useful. He screened Max Milzer, in charge of the fabricating and repair shops on the ship. Max had never even heard of a wheelbarrow. "I can make them up, Mark. Better send me some drawings, though. Did you just invent it?" "As far as I know, a man named Leonardo da Vinci invented it in the 6th century pre-atomic. How soon can you get me a half dozen of them?" "Well, let's see. Welded sheet metal and a pipe for the frame and handles. I'll have some of them for you by noon tomorrow. Now, about hose. How tall are these people, and how long are their arms, and how far can they stoop over?" They were all up late that night. So were the Svants. There was a fire burning in the middle of the village, and watchfires along the edge of the mound. Louis Goffredo was just as distrustful of them as they were of the Terrans. He kept the camp lighted, a strong guard on the alert, and the area of darkness beyond infrared lighted and covered by photoelectric sentries on the ground and snoopers in the air. Like Paul Millard, Louis Goffredo was a worrier and a pessimist. Everything happened for the worst in this worst of all possible galaxies, and if anything could conceivably go wrong, it infallibly would. That was probably why he was still alive and had never had a command massacred. The wheelbarrows, 4 of them, came down from the ship by mid-morning. With them came a grindstone, a couple of cross-cut saws, and a lot of picks and shovels and axes. and cases of sheath knives and mess gear and miscellaneous trade goods, including a lot of the empty wine and whiskey bottles that had been hoarded for the past 4 years. At lunch, the talk was almost exclusively about the language problem. Lillian Ransby, who had not gotten to sleep before sunrise and had just gotten up, was discouraged. "I don't know what we're going to do next," she admitted. "Glen Orant and Anna and I were on it all night and we're nowhere. We have about 100 word-like sounds isolated, and 20 or so are used repeatedly, and we can't assign a meaning to any of them. And none of the savants ever reacted the same way twice to anything we said to them. There's just no one-to-one relationship anywhere." "I'm beginning to doubt they have a language," the Navy intelligence officer said. "Sure, they make a lot of vocal noise. So do chipmunks." "They have to have a language," Anna de Jong declared. "No sapient thought is possible without verbalization." "Well, no society like that is possible without some means of communication." Karl Dorver supported her from the other flank. He seemed to have made that point before. "You know," he added, "I'm beginning to wonder if it mightn't be telepathy." He evidently hadn't suggested that before. The others looked at him in surprise. Anna started to say, "Oh, I doubt if," and then stopped. "I know the race of telepaths is an old gimmick that's been used in New Planet adventure stories for centuries, but maybe we've finally found one.